From 27 News WKOW, this is breaking news.
We start tonight with breaking news right now in downtown Madison. Protests over the death of George Floyd started out peaceful this afternoon, but have turned violent in the past hour. Francisco Almenara is downtown. We want to get right to him. Francisco, what have you been seeing?
Jen, we are seeing police officers from the Madison Police Department slowly walk up against and boxes being thrown in all sorts of directions. We've been seeing the officers. Pepper spray, people standing with their hands up in the air. Rocks just keep throwing towards the officers, large bottles. It's been going on for about the past 10-15 minutes. It started with as you heard before, the peaceful protest that was happening this afternoon turned into this. Multiple police vehicles were broken. Windows were broken. 2 windows at least at the Madison Police Department were broken. They are spraying, as you can see, pepper spray into the protesters standing in the middle of the street. This is a lot smaller of a group of people than there were at the beginning of the protest. This is probably a couple hundred, whereas before there were thousands. Water bottles keep being thrown into the police officers. We are here at the 400 block of State Street, where they just continue walking down, continue having periodic confrontations, periodic spraying of the crowd here with pepper spray to try to get them to disperse. I have not yet seen them attempt to...
There's way too many cops on the streets! Way too many!
I've not yet seen any police attempt to arrest anyone, and we're just continue to back up with the protest line so that we don't get caught up in the pepper spray that police are launching into the ground. We're going to have continuing coverage throughout the entire show of what's going on here, so I'm just going to throw it back to Jen now.
Yeah, Francisco, if you can hear me, have you seen any businesses damaged?
Yes, we saw the Goodman's Jewelers on the 200 block of State Street. Multiple rocks being thrown into the windows there to try to break in. It appeared as if they actually were able to get in, but that was kind of the start of when all of these officers showed up. That was the only damage that I've been able to see so far. Chairs are now being thrown into the police officers here on State Street. This is a very different scene from what we had earlier today.
And Francisco, you mentioned this is very different than what was going on, the planned protest earlier today. Can you briefly describe that for us, what you saw at the Capitol this afternoon?
Yes, thousands of people at the Capitol, obviously frustrated, yelling. There were a lot of chanting, a lot of marching. They marched from the Capitol to the place where Tony Robinson was killed 5 years ago. But all of it peaceful, mostly frustration and chanting. At this point, rocks are being thrown. Very different scene from what we saw earlier today.
Okay. All right, thank you, Francisco. Of course, we'll continue monitoring what's going on right now, but I hope you stay safe out there and everyone as well. Now, again, this all came out of the death of George Floyd in Minnesota a few days ago, killed by an officer. And this is what everyone has been protesting across the country, and now, for the first time today, here in Madison. Thank you, Francisco. We're continuing to follow this breaking news tonight. Protests in Madison, they started out peaceful and have taken a turn with police using pepper spray. Francisco Almenara is still downtown right now. What have you seen since we talked to you last?
Well, Jen, we have moved from, we were up by the 300 block of State Street. Now we're closer to the 600 block. We have consistently seen police officers use pepper spray against the protesters, and in return, protesters throwing rocks and chairs. I did see at least one officer be hit by a chair. They are throwing barriers from nearby restaurants out into the middle of the street, or at least attempting to. It seems like right now we are caught in a bit of an impasse where for the past at least couple minutes, as opposed to the previous 15 or so minutes, police and protesters have both stopped moving. Nope, scratch that. They are starting to move again. More police, there's probably about 24 at least officers in full protective equipment, shields, face masks, batons, and pepper spray both handheld and from what seems to be a sort of rifle pepper spray dispenser. There's at least 3 squad cars that keep moving down, and we are just following along. The air, because we have kept moving, the air isn't necessarily saturated with the pepper spray, but I have been at least able to smell the pepper spray in the air here. But for the most part, we are still moving. I have not seen any other businesses be damaged aside from that Goodman's Jeweler up on the 200 block of State Street before we went on air. But that is what we are seeing right now, Jen.
Okay, thank you, and we will continue checking back in on this tonight. Breaking news continues tonight in Madison. Demonstrations started out peaceful at the state capitol have taken a turn in the past hour and a half or so as demonstrators, started looting, rioting. Oh, here we are. We have Francisco. We are going to head out to him.
Yes, Jen, I don't know if you can still see it in the air, but there is a red haze in the air that came from some form of police gas canister that was thrown into the group. We're here on the 700 block of State Street, getting closer to UW-Madison. But people, continue throwing stuff into the police, and police continue pepper spraying the protesters here. Chant saying, "Say his name." Continuing. We seem to be moving back. This protesters are running. Oh, they're going to. It looks like the protesters are going to try to come around and head off and sort of flank the police officers coming in. Most of the protesters look like they're dissipating to take another route of attack, so to speak, to try to get the police officers at a different angle. But for now, it looks like officers are just coming in this direction, and most of the people in this area have dissipated. But we are sending it back to you, Jen.
Okay, so again, Francisco is in the State Street area where police have been interacting with these protesters that have turned violent in the past hour and a half or so. And we will continue checking back in with him. Thank you, Francisco. Checking back in one more time on that breaking news in downtown Madison as we continue to follow what's happening with these protests. We've seen police using what appears to be pepper spray. Businesses damaged. Francisco is still down there, so let's check back in with him one more time. Francisco?
Jen, we are here back. It looks like the police officers moved back towards the protesters, turned around. They seem to have joined by the state patrol officers, and they launched what seems like another canister of tear gas in that direction. It does seem like a bit of a standstill at this point, but the protesters, it seems, went back the direction that they came from and are now still facing towards the UW campus direction on State Street still. As I said, it's a bit of a standstill as of this moment. Jen, back to you.
Francisco, do you mind going back over what you saw earlier this afternoon when the protests were quite peaceful at the Capitol?
Yes, Jen, earlier today, the march, there were thousands of people walking all the way from the Capitol to the place where Tony Robinson was killed. While there were frustrations in the crowd, most of it was just chanting and talking and singing and speakers, but nothing like this. Is a very different scene from what we had earlier today, where there were thousands of protesters before. This seems to be hundreds, and it looks like the police and State Patrol are continuing back down their way down State Street.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for all those reports tonight, Francisco.